Size doesn't matter. It's the strength of your spirit that counts. That was what Lyrale's mother whispered as she braided her daughter's thick auburn hair. Lyrale held tight to those words even after her mother passed, even after her father vanished into the northern territories with only silence and broken promises. When he returned, he did not come alone. He brought a willowy wife and a daughter carved from moonbeams. Seraphine was everything Lyrale was not. Slender, ethereal, celebrated. Even her wolf form gleamed like starlight on water. Lyrale was nothing at all. Her stepmother's affection belonged to Seraphine. Her father's pride belonged to Seraphine. The pack's admiration, the elders' blessings, the warrior's courtship gifts. Always, always Seraphine. And Lyrale was left with remnants. A hurried embrace when others were watching, a cramped chamber behind the kitchens, and her mother's empty promise. "Don't be difficult, dear," Meralda would say, whenever Lyrale's hunger for belonging showed too plainly. Self-pity is unbecoming, especially in one who already struggles with portion control. Meralda wielded her words like silver needles. When their father was present, she'd rest a hand on Lyrale's shoulder while pulling Seraphine close with both arms. She'd mention Lyrale's concerning appetite and troubling lack of discipline with perfect maternal worry. "She's not like Seraphine," Meralda would tell their father when she believed Lyrale was out of earshot. Perhaps some time away from the main house would help her focus on self-improvement. And their father, exhausted from his campaigns and dazzled by his new family's delicate beauty, would nod absently. But Lyrale had her mother's words to sustain her. Size doesn't matter. It's the strength of your spirit that counts. She threw herself into mastering combat techniques, studying pack law, learning the ancient tongues. She memorized every treaty, practiced diplomacy, honed her strategic mind until it gleamed sharp as any blade. And at last, someone noticed. A distinguished gamma from the eastern reaches came seeking not Seraphine's beauty, but the brilliant strategist. For one luminous moment, her mother's words seemed true. That evening, Meralda brought her honeyed wine and a smile sharp as winter frost. Lyrale drank deeply, dreaming of recognition and purpose at last. She should have known better. When she woke the next dawn and felt what she had become, she finally understood the truth her mother had been too gentle to speak. Perhaps you didn't need to be the most beautiful for your spirit to matter. But when your body became something beyond natural limits, you learned that the physical would always matter more. Lyrale looked at herself in the polished copper mirror above her washing stand and wept until her eyes burned dry. 3 winters had passed since that cursed morning, and Lyrale now lived as a ghost between settlements. The curse had done something impossible, trapped her between forms in a way that defied nature itself. Her body had expanded beyond normal proportions, neither fully human nor wolf, but something twisted between. Her limbs had thickened with unnatural bulk that no amount of fasting could reduce. Her face remained partially transformed, features broadened and coarsened, patches of fur growing in uneven tufts. Even her movements had become labored, as if the very air around her had thickened to honey. The village of Thornwich barely tolerated her presence at their monthly market. She kept to the shadowed corners, her worn cloak stretched tight, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. Nothing. Even so, mothers pulled their children behind their skirts when she passed, and merchants served her quickly, eager for her to move along. "Please," she whispered to the grain merchant, keeping her voice soft. "Just a small sack of barley for these pelts. They're winter fox, very fine." The man wouldn't meet her eyes. "Move along, cursed one," he muttered. "You're blocking real customers." Lyrale glanced at the empty street behind her. There were no other customers. there never were when she appeared. She pulled her hood lower, trying to hide the shame of her existence. Her body ached from the long trek from her cave in the bleak wood, where she'd made her home these past 3 years, marking each season by the changing colors of leaves she could see from her shelter. The other outcasts, the banished, the mad, the diseased, gave her wide berth even there. Meralda had cackled when she discovered her that morning years ago, her beautiful face alight with vicious triumph. "Don't sulk, child." That Gamma needed to understand that Seraphine was his only viable option. But your curse will break. Her eyes had glittered with false sympathy. When a man willingly chooses you as his mate, seeing you exactly as you are. Then she dissolved into laughter because they both knew the truth. No man would ever choose this. Even other shifters, who should have understood the complexity of dual natures, saw her as an abomination, something that might spread like plague. She was making her way toward the forest path, her meager trades tucked in her patched satchel, when she heard the commotion near the town square. A crowd had gathered, their voices sharp with fear and accusation. "I tell you, it was her." A woman's voice rose above the rest. "Who else could have done such a thing? The cursed one will bring doom upon us all if we don't act." Lyralay's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Goodwife Aldara, whose twin sons had fallen ill with fever last winter, and who had been seeking someone to blame ever since. "We should have driven her out moons ago," Aldara continued, her voice growing shrill. "Now look what's happened." Master Aldwin's entire grain store devoured in the night. Enough food to feed the village through winter. Gone. Lyralay's stomach dropped. She'd been nowhere near the grain store. She'd spent the night setting traps in the forest, trying to catch enough game to trade, but the crowd was already murmuring agreement, fear overriding reason. She started to back away, but it was too late. Aldara's sharp eyes found her in the crowd, and her face twisted with vindictive satisfaction. "There!" she shrieked, pointing directly at Lyralay. "There's the cursed one herself. Look at her. Who else could consume so much in a single night?" The crowd turned as one, and Lyralay found herself surrounded by hostile faces, their eyes full of disgust and fear. "I didn't," she started, but her words were drowned in angry shouts. Strong hands seized her arms before she could run. The village enforcer wouldn't meet her eyes as he bound her wrists with iron shackles that bit into her skin. "Sorry, cursed one," he muttered. "But there's been a formal complaint made. I have to take you before the Alpha King for judgment." "But I didn't do anything," she whispered, hating how her voice trembled. "Please, you know I wouldn't." "Do I?" He glanced at her transformed body with barely concealed revulsion. "Can't say I know what something like you might do when hungry enough." Behind him, Goodwife Aldara smiled with savage satisfaction. "Justice at last," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The Alpha King will know how to deal with creatures like this one." As they dragged her toward the waiting prison cart, Lyrali caught a glimpse of movement near Master Aldwin's grain store. Rats. Dozens of them, streaming from a hole in the foundation, their bellies swollen with stolen grain. But by then, it was too late for truth to matter. It always was when you looked like a monster. The prison cart creaked and groaned over the mountain pass, packed with thieves, debtors, and outcasts who whispered in their chains. Lyralay pressed herself into the darkest corner, her bulk making the space feel even more cramped. The other prisoners gave her a wide berth, pressing against the opposite side of the cart as if her curse might be contagious. "Heard the king grows crueler," muttered a thin man with branded cheeks. "Ever since the incident with his cousins." "Poor lords and ladies," sighed a woman who'd been caught stealing bread. wasting away like they're being drained of their very essence. Every morning they're found weaker, though they never leave their towers. Dark magic, hissed another prisoner. What else could it be? Remember the scholar who tried to solve it? Vanished without a trace. The healer from the Silver Plains, too. None dare attempt it now. The king offers any reward? The woman whispered. But what good's gold if you never return to spend it? Lyralei's mind began to turn. 7 noble cousins growing weaker each day, people disappearing when they tried to help, and a king desperate enough to promise anything. A plan began to form in her mind, desperate and dangerous, perfectly suited to someone who had nothing left to lose. The castle loomed before them like a mountain of black iron, its towers clawing at the storm-dark sky. Lyralei's heart hammered against her ribs as they were herded through iron gates and down stone corridors that grew progressively darker. They reached the great hall, the Hall of Shadows, one of the guards called it, and Lyralei's breath caught in her throat. The vast chamber was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by scattered torches that cast writhing shadows on the walls. But at the chamber's heart grew something extraordinary. A massive tree with bark of pure obsidian and leaves that seemed to shimmer with captured starlight. Its branches stretched nearly to the vaulted ceiling, and fruit like condensed midnight hung heavy from its boughs. Beautiful, isn't it? The bread thief whispered. The king's shadow tree. They say his power flows from its fruit. He guards it more jealously than his crown. Reluctantly, Lyralee tore her gaze away as the prisoners were arranged before the throne. The other prisoners shuffled nervously, their chains clanking in the oppressive silence. Do you covet my shadow tree, thief? The king's voice cut through the air like a blade through silk. On his iron throne sat a man forged from battle and loss, broad-shouldered, scarred, silver threading his midnight hair, eyes like a winter storm. At his feet lay 7 nobles, pale and withered like flowers left too long without rain. Lyralee forced her voice steady. No thief could steal such a tree, your majesty. It would take an army. The king's mouth twitched. And yet, you stand accused of devouring an entire grain store. Your appetite will not save you. Tell me your name. They call me the Cursed One, your majesty, she said, lifting her chin despite the weight of her transformed body. And I am no thief. If words cannot save me, perhaps my actions will. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Cursed One? Why do they call you that? She ignored him, seizing the moment. I have heard of your cousin's affliction. The hall grew still as death. The king leaned forward, menace sharpening his voice. Have you now? Then answer me properly. Why do they call you the Cursed One? What hides beneath that cloak? Show yourself. The command brooked no refusal. With trembling hands, Lyralee lowered her hood, knowing this moment would seal her fate one way or another. Gasps and cries of revulsion swept through the hall. Several courtiers stumbled backward. A guard dropped his spear with a clatter that echoed through the chamber. Even some of the other prisoners recoiled, pressing against their chains to get away from her. Only the king remained unmoved, his storm-gray eyes studying her with calculating intensity. A curse, then? His voice carried no emotion, as if he'd seen stranger things. Yes, your majesty. She straightened despite the weight of hundreds of disgusted stares. Which is why I have nothing left to lose. I offer myself to discover what afflicts your cousins. In exchange for what? The king's voice was sharp as winter wind. Freedom and the favor you promised the others, Lyralee replied. His eyes flared with something dangerous. Your freedom should be favor enough, creature. "With respect, your majesty, I risk my life." Others vanished attempting this, which is why none dare try now. I deserve fair compensation for such risk. The hall fell silent except for the crackling of torch flames. The Alpha King leaned forward in his throne, and for a moment, Lyrelai thought he might order her execution on the spot. "Very well," he said at last. "3 nights starting tonight. Solve the mystery, and you shall have freedom and any favor within reason. Fail, and I execute you as planned." The obsidian tree shimmered faintly, its melancholy presence tugging at something deep in her chest. Around the throne, the 7 cousins watched with eyes like dying stars. "I accept," Lyrelai said, and her voice did not waver. The king gestured to his guards. "Take her to the tower beside my cousin's chambers. Post a watch. If she harms them or attempts to flee, kill her immediately." Lyrelai was given a narrow cell with only a thin pallet and a single candle. Through the barred window, she could see the 7 towers where the cousins were housed, each glowing faintly with protective wards that pulsed like heartbeats. "I'll be watching you," one guard growled, taking up his post outside her door. "One wrong move toward their lordships, and curse or no curse, I'll run you through." As midnight approached, Lyrelai observed carefully through her window. The cousins' towers remained lit, but something was wrong. The lights flickered in a pattern, almost like they were moving in sequence, as if responding to some unheard rhythm. Near midnight, her door suddenly opened. One of the cousins stood there, Lady Valessa, the eldest, bearing a steaming goblet. Even in her weakened state, she was beautiful, with hair like spun silver and eyes of palest blue. "A warming drink for our guest," she murmured, her voice dreamy and distant. The kindness in her tone nearly undid Lyrelai, but memory flared sharp and bright. Another cup, another night. Meralda's honeyed wine and false maternal blessing. "Thank you, my lady," Lyrelai said, accepting the goblet. When Valessa drifted away, she poured the liquid into a crack in the stone floor and pretended to sleep. Through barely open eyes, she watched as Valessa offered a similar cup to the guard. He drank deeply and soon collapsed into unnatural slumber, his snores echoing through the corridor. An hour passed in tense silence. Then, movement. All 7 cousins emerged from their towers simultaneously, not in night clothes, but in robes of deepest black threaded with silver. Moving in perfect synchronization, they descended from their towers and gathered in the courtyard below. Lyrelai shook the guard, but he was lost in drugged sleep. With no choice, she squeezed through her narrow window, a painful, humiliating process given her transformed bulk, and followed. The cousins moved like sleepwalkers through the castle, descending stairs she hadn't known existed. They passed through a section of wall that looked solid but gave way at their touch, revealing a hidden passage that spiraled down, down, down into the earth. The air grew thick with magic that tasted of copper and shadow. Lyrelai followed at a distance, her breathing labored from the descent and the oppressive atmosphere. The passage opened into a vast underground cavern, but within it existed something impossible, an entire realm with its own mystical sky, stars that burned with dark fire against a twilight canvas. The magic here was so strong it created its own reality, complete with trees whose trunks were made of living shadow, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Music drifted through the air, but it was wrong somehow, played in minor keys that made her teeth ache. At the avenue's end lay a lake of what looked like liquid obsidian, its surface perfectly still. Boats waited at the shore, each steered by figures that seemed only half solid, shifting between substance and shadow. The cousins stepped into the boats without hesitation. Lyrali watched in growing alarm as the vessels began to drift across the dark water, but she had no way to follow. "Does the lady require passage?" The voice came from directly beside her, smooth as silk over steel. Lyrali spun around to find a man lounging in his own boat, arms crossed casually. His hair was white as bone, his features sharp and beautiful in an otherworldly way, with eyes that shifted between deep amethyst and midnight black like the enchanted sky above them. Lyrale's breath caught, and she quickly pulled her hood lower, acutely aware of her cursed form. I have nothing to pay you with, sir," she mumbled, her voice rough. "Then I shall require no payment," he said, extending one elegant hand toward her. "Come." Every instinct screamed danger, but the cousins were already halfway across the lake. She climbed into the boat carefully, pointedly not taking his offered hand. She couldn't bear the thought of him feeling her transformed flesh, the unnatural thickness of her fingers. "Would the lady like me to take her to the gathering?" he asked, pushing off from the shore with a long pole that seemed to be made of crystallized shadow. "The gathering?" Lyrelei blinked. "Well, what did you think the music was for?" His smile revealed teeth just slightly too sharp to be human. The gathering. That must be where the cousins were going. "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, please." The man pulled the boat with effortless grace, humming along with the discordant music. The melody made her skin crawl, but there was something hypnotic about it too. When they reached the far shore, he leaped out with dancer's grace and offered his hand again. Lyrale ignored it once more, struggling to climb out on her own, her transformed body making every movement graceless and difficult. His laughter was like breaking glass. "I care nothing for your curse, mortal child," Lyrale gasped, ducking her face back into the shadows of her hood. "Very well," she heard him say. "Keep your secrets if you must." He gestured toward a path that led through gardens where flowers bloomed in shades of gray and black, their petals edged with silver. What Lyrali saw next stole what remained of her composure entirely. The gathering unfolded within a vast pavilion that seemed to be carved from a single massive pearl, but one that had been corrupted somehow, its surface swirling with oil-dark rainbows. Hundreds of beings moved across the floor in a dance that hurt to watch, their movements too fluid, too precise, as if they were puppets on invisible strings. And at the heart of it all danced the 7 cousins, whirling endlessly in perfect mechanical synchronization. "What is this place?" Lyrelei breathed. "The Shadow Court, of course," her companion replied. "The kingdom of the Dark Fae." As she looked around at the otherworldly perfection of every face and form, she knew it had to be true. Only dark magic could create such terrible beauty. "They find your cousins quite entertaining," her companion said, his tone light but edged with something crueler. "Though I suspect they won't last much longer at this rate." "Why?" Lyrelei demanded, watching the cousins spin in their endless mechanical dance. "Well, they do look rather pathetic, don't they?" He tilted his head, studying them like specimens. Dancing themselves to exhaustion like broken marionettes, the shadow feeds on their vitality with every step. Horror shot through Lyrelei. She started forward, meaning to grab one of the cousins to shake them awake. "Useless," her companion said. "They won't hear you." "They've been bound by shadow itself." "By whom?" Lyrelei asked, though she suspected she already knew. "By the Shadow King's will," he said, gesturing toward the far end of the pavilion. Lyrelei followed his gaze to where a figure sat on a throne of twisted obsidian, watching the dancers with an expression of profound boredom. Even from this distance she could feel the weight of his power, dark and crushing as the depths of the ocean. "He doesn't seem very entertained," she observed. Oh, but he is, her companion assured her. The suffering of others is the only thing that still amuses him after centuries of existence. The callousness in his tone made Lyralay's stomach turn. I need to leave, she said, taking a step back. She had her answer now. The cousins were being drained by dark fae magic. But would anyone believe her? Dance with me first? He asked, and for a moment, his beautiful face showed something that looked almost like genuine interest. Lyralay's heart stuttered. No one had ever asked her to dance, not since the curse. I cannot, she said, acutely aware of her transformed body. I would only embarrass you. You think I care what these creatures think? He gestured dismissively at the other fae. Dance with me, or I won't let you leave. The threat was delivered so casually that it took a moment to register. Lyralee looked around desperately. The other dark fae had begun to notice them, their two perfect faces turning in their direction with predatory interest. One dance, she agreed reluctantly. He led her onto the floor, and to her surprise, the dance required no touching. They circled each other in complex patterns, their bodies weaving through space in perfect synchronization. Despite her transformed bulk, she found herself moving with surprising grace, as if the very shadows were supporting her weight, making her movements fluid where they should have been clumsy. Interesting, he murmured, his amethyst dark eyes never leaving hers. You move differently than I expected. Because I'm so large? She asked bitterly. Because you're so careful, he corrected. Every movement calculated, considered. You've learned to navigate a world that wasn't made for you. The shadows recognize that struggle. They're helping you move as you truly wish to. Before she could respond, he waved his hand, and the world shimmered around them. The pavilion remained, but overlaid on it was another image, the Alpha King's court, harsh and cold. This is what awaits you, he said. Disgust, fear, a world that sees you as nothing but an aberration. The vision faded, returning them to the dark pavilion. But you don't have to return, he continued. You could stay here. As your prisoner? Lyrelei asked. As my equal, he replied. She stumbled, staring at him with wide eyes. You mock me. I never mock, he said, his voice suddenly serious. Stay. In the shadow court, form is fluid, changeable. You could be anything you wished. You barely know me, Lyrelei whispered. I know you're clever enough to find this place, brave enough to follow despite your fear, strong enough to bear a burden that would break most spirits. His eyes burned into hers. I've watched you through the shadows longer than you know. In centuries of existence, I've never met anyone who intrigued me as you do. Watched me? Lyrelei asked, startled. The shadows tell me things, he said cryptically. They whispered of a girl named Lyrelei, who bore her curse with dignity, who helped others despite receiving only scorn in return. So that was how he knew her name. The shadows themselves had told him. Before she could respond, he waved his hand again. The world shimmered, and suddenly she was standing before an enormous mirror framed in silver and shadow. But the reflection staring back wasn't her cursed form. It was herself as she had been, but more than that, herself perfected. Her body was strong and curved in all the right places, her skin glowing with health, her movements fluid and graceful. This is what I see when I look at you, he said, appearing beside her in the reflection. This is who you truly are beneath the curse. Tears gathered in her eyes as she stared at the vision of herself, not thin like Seraphine, but powerful, substantial, beautiful in her own way. You could look like this always, he said softly. Never again would someone you trust betray you for your appearance. In the reflection, he stepped closer, his hands hovering near her shoulders. Stay with me. Let me give you everything your world denied you. She turned from the mirror to face him directly, her heart hammering. The offer was everything she'd ever dreamed of. No more hiding. No more shame. No more loneliness. And the cousins? She asked. What of them? He stepped closer. You barely know them. They would fear you just as the others do. They're dying, she said. Everything dies eventually, he replied with a shrug. Lirali studied his beautiful face, searching for something, anything real beneath the perfect mask. She reached out tentatively, her transformed hand moving toward his cheek. Her fingers passed through him like smoke. The shock of it hit her like ice water. He wasn't even here. He was just another illusion, another trick. You're not real, she whispered, her hand falling to her side. None of this is real. Pain flashed across his features, genuine, devastating pain that made her chest ache despite everything. I'm as real as I can be, he said quietly, given the circumstances. She looked around the pavilion with new understanding, the dancing cousins, the dark fey court, even this beautiful creature before her. All of it was wrong somehow, like a painting where the perspective was slightly off. This isn't about finding something, is it? She said slowly. It's about choosing something. His silence was answer enough. I won't abandon them, she said, lifting her chin. Not for beauty, not for power, not even for... She swallowed hard. Not even for acceptance. Something shifted in the air around them. The pavilion began to fade at the edges, the music growing distant, the other dancers becoming translucent as shadows. You've passed the first test, he said formally, though something in his expression suggested he wished she hadn't. You chose duty over desire. The world reformed around them into something different, a vast garden maze made entirely of thorns. The walls rose 20 feet high, their surfaces covered in roses that bloomed black as midnight, their petals edged with silver that caught the strange light of the underground realm's mystical sky. Your second test, the white-haired figure announced, lies within this maze. You must find the heart before the moon sets. The heart of what? Lyra Lee asked. His smile was sharp as the thorns surrounding them. That's for you to discover. Though I should mention, the thorns are quite poisonous. One scratch and you'll sleep for eternity. Then how am I supposed to... But he was already fading, his form dissolving like smoke. I'll be watching, his voice echoed. Try not to disappoint me. Lyra Lie. She no longer questioned how he knew her name. The shadows had told him, as they told him everything that happened in darkness. Above, a crescent moon hung in the magical sky of this underground realm, already beginning its descent toward the horizon. Lyra Lie studied the maze entrance. The path was narrow, almost too narrow for her transformed bulk. She would have to squeeze through, risking the thorns with every step. But what choice did she have? She entered carefully, holding her breath, trying to make herself as small as possible. The thorns caught at her cloak, tearing the fabric. One grazed her arm, and immediately she felt drowsiness tugging at her consciousness. She bit her tongue hard, using the pain to stay awake. Left turn, dead end, back, right turn, another dead end. The moon continued its relentless descent. Then she heard it, crying, soft, broken sobs echoing through the maze. She followed the sound, her movements becoming more desperate as the moon sank lower. The crying led her deeper into the maze until she found its source. A figure huddled in a small clearing, surrounded by the thorniest section of the maze she'd seen yet. It was a young woman, but as Lyra Lee approached, she realized with shock that it was Seraphine, or something that looked exactly like her. Her stepsister sat with her knees drawn to her chest, her perfect face streaked with tears. "Seraphine," Lyra Lee called cautiously. The figure looked up, and Lyra Lee saw that her eyes were completely black, like pools of shadow. "She hates me," the figure whispered. "Mother says I'm perfect, but I know she hates me. I'm just a tool to hurt you." Lyra Lee's breath caught. "What?" "I never wanted to be the favorite," Shadow Seraphine continued. "I wanted a sister. I wanted you to like me. But Mother said I had to be perfect, had to be everything you weren't, or Father would send us away." "You're not real," Lyra Lee said, but her voice wavered. "Aren't I?" Shadow Seraphine stood, and Lyra Lee saw that her form was wavering, shifting between solid and smoke. "I'm the truth you never wanted to see. The heart of your pain isn't that you were rejected. It's that you rejected me first. You hated me before I ever had a chance to be your sister." The words hit Lyra Lee like physical blows. She wanted to deny them, but hadn't she? Hadn't she hated Seraphine from the moment she'd walked through the door? Hadn't she refused every tentative overture of friendship, too consumed by jealousy to see that Seraphine might be trapped too? Lyra Lee's voice broke. "I'm sorry." Shadow Seraphine smiled sadly. "The heart of the maze isn't a place or a thing. It's acknowledging the truth we bury deepest, the truth that our pain often comes from our own choices as much as others' cruelty." The maze began to dissolve around them, thorns melting like ice in spring. Lyra Lee found herself standing in another part of the underground realm, the white-haired figure materializing beside her. "Interesting," he said, studying her with those eyes that shifted like twilight. "Most people argue with their truth. They deny it, fight it, try to destroy it. But you accepted it." "What was the point of that?" Lyra Lee demanded, tears still burning her eyes. "Every curse has a core," he replied. "Yours isn't really about your body, is it? It's about the hatred you carry. The weight of it transformed you more than any magic could." Lyra Lee wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat. Hadn't she felt herself growing heavier with each passing year? Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, as if the burden of her resentment was literally weighing her down. "One more test," the figure said. "If you pass, you and the cousins go free. And if I fail," his smile was sad and beautiful, "then you become part of my shadow garden forever. Another decoration for my realm, frozen in your moment of choice." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why trap the cousins? Why test me?" "Because," he said, and for the first time his voice carried genuine emotion, "I've been alone in the shadows for so long that I've forgotten what light looks like. And you carry light inside you, even buried under all that pain. The shadows whisper of it constantly." The final test materialized around them as a garden of statues, hundreds of them, all perfectly carved from what looked like frozen shadow. Each statue was unique: warriors with swords raised, scholars bent over books, children reaching for butterflies that would never land. All of them had expressions of profound sorrow, as if they'd been frozen in their moment of greatest despair. "Beautiful, aren't they?" the white-haired figure said, running his hand along one statue's arm. "My collection of those who failed their tests." Lyra Lee's blood ran cold. These are all people? Were people, he corrected. Now they're part of my realm forever, feeding the shadows with their trapped sorrow. She looked around in growing horror. So many lives, so many stories ended. Each statue seemed to whisper of dreams unfulfilled, loves lost, hopes extinguished. Your final test is simple, he continued. Choose. Choose what? He gestured to the center of the garden where two pedestals stood. On one sat a vial of liquid silver that seemed to glow with inner light. On the other lay a key made of crystallized shadow. The vial will break your curse, he said. You'll return to your original form, beautiful and whole. You can take it and leave, and I'll even release the cousins as promised. And the key? His expression grew complex, layers of emotion flickering across his features. The key unlocks the chains that bind me to this realm. You see, I wasn't always the Shadow King. Once I had another name, another life. But I was cursed too, trapped here to rule over darkness and feed on sorrow because He paused. Because I couldn't accept love when it was offered. The curse can only be broken if someone chooses to free me over themselves. But if I choose the key, I stay cursed, Lyra Lee said. Yes. She looked between the two objects. This isn't really a choice, is it? You know I'll choose the vial. Anyone would. Would they? He stepped closer, and for the first time, she could see through his beautiful mask to something desperate and ancient and infinitely sad beneath. In all the centuries I've been here, through all the tests I've given, no one has ever chosen differently. Because you're asking them to sacrifice themselves for a stranger who's been tormenting them. Am I a stranger? He asked softly. Haven't we danced together? Haven't I shown you truths about yourself? Haven't I offered you everything I have? You've manipulated me, she countered. But even as she said it, she remembered the genuine pain in his eyes when she'd rejected his offer, the sadness in his voice when he spoke of loneliness. She approached the pedestals, her heavy footsteps echoing in the silent garden. The vial glowed more brightly as she got closer, as if calling to her. She could be free. She could be herself again. She could return home whole. But then she looked at the statues around her. All these people who had chosen themselves, and where had it gotten them? They were still trapped, just in a different way. What's your real name? She asked without turning around. Silence stretched between them. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. Zephyrian. Zephyrian, she repeated, tasting the name. How long have you been here? 8 centuries. 8 centuries of loneliness, of darkness, of feeding on sorrow because it was the only sustenance his curse allowed. 8 centuries of testing people, hoping someone would choose differently, only to be disappointed again and again. Lorelei thought of her own loneliness, her 3 years of isolation. It had nearly broken her. How had he survived 800? She thought of Seraphine, trapped in her mother's expectations, of the cousins, dancing themselves to death, of all the different prisons people built for themselves and each other. Her hand hovered over the vial. Freedom was right there, gleaming and perfect. Then she thought of her mother's words. It's the strength of your spirit that counts. What kind of strength was it to choose yourself when someone else would remain trapped forever? What kind of spirit valued personal freedom over another's eternal suffering? She grabbed the key. The moment her fingers closed around it, the world exploded with light and shadow. She heard Zephyrian gasp, heard the sound of chains breaking, felt magic older than kingdoms unraveling around them. The very air seemed to sing with released power. When the chaos settled, she found herself standing in a transformed garden, The statues were cracking, shadow falling away to reveal living, breathing people beneath. The thorns had become normal roses. The eternal twilight was brightening into actual dawn. And Zephyrian, he stood before her, no longer pale as bone but with warm brown skin, his hair now black with threads of premature silver, his eyes a warm amber instead of shifting darkness. He looked younger and older at once, mortal and magical simultaneously. "You chose me," he said, his voice full of wonder. "You actually chose to free me." "Well," Lyrelei said, trying to sound casual despite the tears running down her face. "I figured 8 centuries was punishment enough for anyone." He laughed, and it was nothing like the cold, breaking glass sound from before. It was warm and real and slightly rusty, as if he was remembering how. "But your curse," he started. "Is mine to bear," she finished. "I've carried it this long. I can keep carrying it." "No," he said firmly. "No, you can't. Because I won't let you." Before she could ask what he meant, he placed his hands on her shoulders. She felt warmth flow through her, not the violent magic of transformation, but something gentler, like sunlight after a long winter. "A curse can only be broken by acceptance," he said softly. "You accepted your truth in the maze. You accepted the burden of choice in the garden. And you accepted me, even knowing what I was. The curse has no more hold on you." Lyralee looked down at herself. Her body was changing, but not back to what she had been before. Instead, she was becoming what she had seen in the mirror. Strong, substantial, beautiful in her own unique way. Not thin like Seraphine, not small like she'd been before, but perfectly, powerfully herself. "The cousins," she gasped, remembering. "Are free," Zephyrian assured her. "My realm is dissolving. Everyone will return to where they belong." "Including you?" He smiled, and it was tinged with uncertainty. "I suppose I'll have to figure out where that is." 8 centuries is a long time to be away from the world. Around them, the freed statues were becoming more solid, more real. Some were laughing, some crying, all of them alive. The cousins appeared among them, no longer pale and drained but glowing with renewed vitality. "How do we get back?" Lyrelei asked. Zephyrian took her hand, solid and warm and real. "Together," he said. "If you'll have me. I know I have much to atone for, but—" "Zephyrian," she interrupted, squeezing his hand. "Shut up and take us home." He laughed again, that wonderful rusty sound, and the world began to shift around them one last time, carrying them up from shadow into light. The world reformed around them like a painting being restored, colors bleeding back into reality, shadows retreating to their proper places. Lyrelei found herself standing in the Alpha King's Hall of Shadows, but it was transformed. Dawnlight streamed through windows she hadn't noticed before, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny stars. The obsidian tree still stood at the hall's center, but as the light touched it, it began to change. The black bark cracked and fell away in sheets, revealing pale wood beneath that glowed with soft luminescence. Its dark leaves turned silver, then gold, then green. A proper tree, alive and growing. Around her stood dozens of confused people, all those who had been statues in Zephyrian's garden. The 7 cousins were among them, their color restored, looking around in wonder. And beside her, still holding her hand, stood Zephyrian, blinking in the morning light as if he'd never seen the sun before. "What sorcery is this?" The Alpha King's voice boomed across the hall. He stood from his throne, his storm-gray eyes wide with shock. "Guards!" Seize them! But the guards hesitated, staring at the transformed tree, at the crowd of people who had materialized from nowhere, at Lyrelai herself, no longer the cursed creature they'd brought in chains, but a woman who radiated quiet strength. "No sorcery, Your Majesty," Lyrelai said, her voice carrying new authority. "Only the breaking of old curses and the settling of older debts." She stepped forward, and the crowd parted before her. "Your cousins were being drained by the Shadow Court. They're free now, as are all these people who were trapped trying to save them." "Impossible," the king snarled. "The Shadow Court is a myth, a story told to frighten children." "Is it?" Zephyrian stepped forward, and though he no longer radiated dark power, something about his presence made everyone in the hall take notice. "I was its king for 8 centuries, feeding on mortal sorrow because my curse demanded it. Your cousins were merely the latest in a long line of victims." The Alpha King's face paled. "You're saying you're the Shadow King? The monster from the old stories?" "Was," Zephyrian corrected, "until this woman chose to free me rather than herself." He looked at Lyrelai with such warmth that she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Lyrelai!" A familiar voice gasped from the crowd. She turned to see Seraphine pushing through the gathered people, her perfect face shocked. Behind her came Meralda, whose expression cycled rapidly through disbelief, rage, and calculation. "That's impossible," Meralda said coldly. "That creature cannot be Lyrelai. This is some trick." "No trick, stepmother," Lyrelai said calmly, "though I learned quite a bit about those recently." "But your curse," Seraphine said, her voice smaller than Lyrelai had ever heard it. "Mother said it couldn't be broken unless someone chose me as their mate, seeing me exactly as I was," Lyrelai finished. "Yes, she made sure I knew that. What she didn't mention was that there are other ways to break curses. Acceptance for one, truth for another, sacrifice for a third." She looked directly at Seraphine. "I owe you an apology. I hated you before you ever had a chance to be my sister. I was so consumed by jealousy that I couldn't see you were trapped too." Seraphine's eyes filled with tears. I wanted us to be friends, but Mother said—" "I know," Lyrelai said gently. "We were both pawns in her game." "How dare you!" Meralda hissed, her beautiful face twisting with rage. "After everything I did for you." "You cursed her," Zephyrian interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of the darkness he'd once commanded. "You twisted her body to match the hatred you'd cultivated in her heart. That kind of cruelty. I recognize it. I lived it for centuries." The Alpha King had been silent during this exchange, but now he stood. "You claimed to solve the mystery of my cousin's affliction," he said to Lyrelai. "You succeeded where all others failed. Name your reward." Lyrelai looked around the hall, at the freed prisoners, at the transformed tree, at Seraphine's tear-streaked face, at Zephyrian standing beside her. "I want justice," she said, "for everyone here who was wrongly imprisoned, falsely accused, or cursed without cause." The king's eyes narrowed. "That's not within my power to give." "Isn't it?" Lyrelai challenged. "You're the Alpha King. Your word is law. These people were trapped for trying to help your family." "The woman who cursed you is your stepmother," the king pointed out. "That's a family matter, not a royal one." "Then make it royal," Zephyrian suggested, his tone deceptively mild. "After all, she used dark magic within your realm. That affects all your subjects. Unless you want people to think you tolerate dark magic when it suits you." The king looked between them, calculating. Lyrelai could see him weighing options, considering the crowd of witnesses, the transformed tree that proved magic was real and present in his hall. "Very well," he said finally. "Meralda of the Northern Territories, you stand accused of using dark magic to curse your stepdaughter. The evidence is clear. The curse has been broken, revealing its true nature. You are hereby banished from this realm." Meralda's face went white. "You can't. I'm the maid of a respected warrior." "Who abandoned his first daughter for years?" the king interrupted. "Where is he now, by the way?" "Still conveniently absent?" Meralda's silence was answer enough. "Banishment," the king repeated. "You have 3 days to leave. If you're found within our borders after that, the penalty is death." "Mother, no!" Seraphine rushed to Meralda, but her mother pushed her away. "Don't be weak," Meralda snapped. "I'll survive, as I always have." "But you," she looked at Seraphine with something like disappointment. "You'll have to learn to survive without me. Try not to disappoint me more than you already have." The cruelty of the words made everyone in the hall flinch. Seraphine stood frozen, her face crumbling. Lyrali moved without thinking, wrapping her stepsister in a hug. "She's wrong," she whispered. "You're not a disappointment. You're just free." 3 days passed in a blur of activity. The freed prisoners were processed and released, their stories documented for the royal archives. The 7 cousins, fully recovered, threw themselves into helping organize the chaos, grateful to be useful again. And through it all, Zephyrian stayed by Lyralei's side, still seeming amazed by simple things like sunlight and the taste of bread. 8 centuries of shadows, he murmured one morning, standing in a patch of sun in the castle courtyard. I'd forgotten colors could be so vivid. I'd forgotten warmth could exist without burning. "What will you do now?" Lyrelai asked, watching him marvel at a butterfly that had landed on his hand. "I don't know," he admitted. "I have no kingdom anymore, no realm to rule. I'm just Zephyrian, whoever that is." "You could stay," she suggested carefully. "The Alpha King offered you a position in his court. Apparently, someone who understands dark magic could be useful." Zephyrian made a face. "Serving the Alpha King? After centuries of being served myself?" "It's honest work," Lyralee pointed out. "And you did say you had much to atone for." He looked at her with those warm amber eyes. "Is that what you're doing? Staying here to do honest work?" Lyralee had been offered a position too, advisor to the king on matters of justice and mercy. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of when she was cursed, but somehow it felt small. "I don't know," she admitted. "For so long, all I wanted was to belong somewhere. Now that I have the option, I'm not sure this is where I belong." "Where do you think you belong?" Zephyrian asked softly. Before she could answer, Seraphine appeared in the courtyard. She'd been staying at the castle since Meralda's banishment, unsure where else to go, wandering the halls like a lost ghost. "Lyrelai," she said hesitantly, "could we talk?" Zephyrian excused himself with a bow, leaving the sisters alone. Lyrali noticed how he touched her shoulder gently before departing, a casual intimacy that still made her heart flutter. "I've been thinking," Seraphine said, sitting on a stone bench, "about everything Mother did, everything I let her do." "You were a child," Lyrelai said, sitting beside her. "We both were." "But I benefited from it," Seraphine insisted. "Every dress, every suitor, every compliment, they all came at your expense." "Yes," Lyrelai agreed simply. "They did." Seraphine looked surprised at the directness. "You're not going to tell me it wasn't my fault?" "Some of it wasn't," Lyralee said, but some of it was. Just like some of my pain was my own doing. I chose to hate you. I chose to let that hatred consume me. We both made choices, Seraphine. The question is, what we choose now. I want to choose differently, Seraphine said, tears streaming down her face. I want us to be sisters. Real sisters. But I don't know how. Neither do I, Lyralee admitted, but maybe we can figure it out together. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. Finally, Seraphine spoke again, her voice stronger than before. I've been offered a position with the Eastern Pack. They need someone to help organize their libraries. They say I have a gift for categorizing and preserving knowledge. That sounds perfect for you, Lyralee said, remembering how Seraphine had always loved books, though Meralda had discouraged it as unbecoming. Would you come with me? Seraphine asked suddenly. You and Lord Zephyrian? The Eastern Pack is more accepting of those who are different. They value knowledge over appearance. We could start fresh there, all of us. Lyralee's heart leaped at the possibility. A new beginning, away from the memories and prejudices of this place. I'll think about it, she promised, though her heart had already decided. That evening, she found Zephyrian in the transformed tree's garden. The tree had become something miraculous. Its fruit, when eaten, could reveal truth, heal old wounds, restore what was lost. Already, people were coming from across the realm to seek its blessing. It's beautiful, she said, standing beside him. It was beautiful before, too, he said quietly, as the obsidian tree, just in a different way. Do you miss it? She asked. The Shadow Court? I miss the power, he admitted. The certainty of who I was, even if who I was a monster. Now I'm just a man with too much history and too much to make amends for. Seraphine asked us to come with her to the Eastern Pack, Lyralee said, to start over. Zephyrian turned to her, his expression unreadable. Us? If you want, she said quickly. I mean, you don't have to. He silenced her with a kiss, soft and sweet, and nothing like the cold seduction he'd attempted in the Shadow Court. This was real, warm, human. Wherever you go, he said when they parted, I follow. You freed me, Lyralee, not just from the curse, but from myself. I spent 8 centuries feeding on sorrow because I couldn't bear my own. You taught me that bearing it is the only way through it. We taught each other, she corrected. Then let's keep teaching each other, he said, taking her hands, in the Eastern Pack, or wherever else life takes us. The next morning, as they prepared to leave, the Alpha King summoned them one last time. You could have asked for riches, he said to Lyralee, power, lands, a title. Instead, you asked for justice for others. Justice was worth more than gold, Lyralee replied. The king nodded slowly. The Eastern Pack is lucky to have you. All 3 of you. He handed her a sealed letter. My recommendation, should you need it. Though I suspect you won't. As their carriage rolled away from the castle, Lyralee looked back at the Hall of Shadows one last time. Through the windows she could see the transformed tree, its branches reaching toward the light. It would stand there forever, a reminder that even the darkest curses could be broken, that even the deepest shadows could give way to dawn. No regrets? Zephyrian asked, following her gaze. None, she said, then reconsidered. Well, 1? What's that? She smiled. I wish I'd grabbed that key sooner. 8 centuries was far too long for anyone to wait for freedom. Perhaps, Zephyrian said, pulling her close. But then I wouldn't have met you. And you, my dear Lyra, were worth the wait. Lyra? She asked, amused by the nickname. If you'll permit me, he said. Lyra Lee for formal occasions, Lyra for all the informal ones we'll share. From the driver's seat, Seraphine called back, If you two are done being romantic, we have a long journey ahead. They laughed, all three of them, and the sound was bright as morning, free as birds taking flight, sweet as fruit from a tree that had finally learned to bloom. 5 years later, Lyra stood in the garden she'd cultivated at the Eastern Pack's capital. It wasn't a garden of shadows or cursed thorns, but a living testament to transformation. Plants from across the realm grew here, some that shouldn't have been able to coexist, but did through careful tending and understanding. Aunt Lyra! Uncle Zeph! A small voice called out, and a tiny girl with Seraphine's delicate features but Lyralai's sturdy build came running through the flowers. Careful, Rosalie! Seraphine called, following her daughter at a more sedate pace. Her husband, Marcus, walked beside her, carrying their infant son. Lyra scooped up her niece, spinning her around until she squealed with laughter. Have you been practicing your letters? Yes. Mother says I'm ready for real books now. Of course you are, Zephyrian said, producing a small leather journal from his pocket. Smart girls deserve their own books to fill with stories. Rosalie clutched the journal like a treasure, beaming. Later, as the sun set over the garden, Lyra and Zephyrian sat watching the family play. Seraphine had blossomed in the Eastern Pack, becoming their head librarian. She'd met Marcus there, a man who loved her for her mind rather than her beauty. Their children were growing up free from the poisonous expectations that had shaped their mothers' lives. Any regrets? Zephyrian asked, taking Lyra's hand. She considered the question. They'd never had children of their own, some lingering effect of their curses perhaps, or simply the choice to nurture others' growth instead. They'd built this garden together, created a sanctuary for those who didn't fit elsewhere. Former prisoners from the Shadow King's realm came here sometimes, seeking peace. Even some of the old statues had found their way to them, needing a place to remember how to be human again. No, she said finally, no regrets. A messenger arrived then, bearing the seal of the Alpha King. Zephyrian opened it, read, and laughed. What is it? Lyra asked. The old obsidian tree, he said. It's growing again. From the roots of the transformed one, the king wants to know if we think it's dangerous. Lyra smiled. Tell him that darkness and light can coexist. They just need the right gardener. As night fell, the garden began to glow, not with magical light, but with fireflies that Rosalie chased with shrieking delight. Seraphine and Marcus watched their children play, their faces soft with contentment. And Lyra sat with Zephyrian, the former Shadow King and the formerly cursed girl, proof that even the deepest wounds could heal with enough patience, truth, and love. You know what I realized? Lyra said suddenly. What's that? My mother was right all along. Size doesn't matter. It's the strength of your spirit that counts. I just had to learn that the strength wasn't in enduring the pain alone. It was in choosing to let others help carry it. Zephyrian squeezed her hand. And my curse taught me that power means nothing if you're alone in the dark. Better to be powerless in the light with those you love. Above them, the stars began to appear, neither the false stars of the Shadow Court nor the cold, distant lights of the mortal realm, but something in between, real and magical at once, darkness and light in perfect balance. In the Eastern Pax histories, they would write of Lady Lyra the Just and Lord Zephyrian the Redeemed, who turned a cursed garden into a paradise. But for now, they were simply Lyra and Zeph, watching fireflies dance while a little girl's laughter filled the air with music sweeter than any fairy song. The curse, it turned out, had been the beginning, not the end. And sometimes, the most beautiful gardens grew from the darkest soil. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. Share your favorite quote or moment in the comments. I'll pick one person to win a free month of access to my Patreon, where you'll find exclusive stories, bonus chapters, and other surprises.